Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him, and today we are going over a real-life fantasy football rookie draft. That is right, no more mock drafts. We're doing it for real now, and we are covering a draft that I'm actually a part of, a league that I am in. It's a pretty competitive league. A lot of free thinkers on this league. Stay tuned to the end to see an absolute steal I got in the end of the second round. I'll give you a hint. He was drafted in the top 10 of this past NFL draft, and it might not be who you think it is, so stay tuned for that. Let's get right to it, gang. This is a super flex point per first down league, and it is shaping up. We've gotten through 2 full rounds already. We may have breaking news while I'm recording because I'm currently negotiating with a trade to move up to 3.1 so I can hopefully grab Roman Wilson with that pick. So stay tuned to the end. We might get some real fireworks here in studio. And I'm pulling it up right now. We'll probably have these bottom rows censored for you. That's why you're seeing those bars, because I want it to be a surprise and I want to go in linear order just to see exactly how this all panned out. Of course, no surprise here. We got Caleb Williams first overall. We always say that rookie quarterbacks don't always hit at a very high rate. You're much better off going off with a different skill position, even in super flex when they are so valuable. But because of that, because they're so valuable, you kind of have to take them when you get an opportunity to. So yeah, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, they aren't sure things, but those guys are usually drafting that early for a reason. It's because their team stinks and they need a quarterback in the super flex league. So that's why you'll see quarterbacks going off super early. And rightfully so here. I think it's the correct order for what it's worth. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Personally, if I don't need a quarterback and I do happen to have one of those top draft picks, I'm trying to trade out at this time, just with the way this draft panned out. You'll see in a second here. Marvin Harrison going third. I'm fine with that. If you want to take Marv second over Jaden Daniels and Drake May, I'm fine with that. So Drake May goes 104 here. Again, I'm totally fine with it. I think he's got enough rushing upside to take there in the top 5. Moving on, Rome Odunze, the first big surprise of this draft, goes 5th overall ahead of Malik Nabers. I think this is a massive mistake. I think first year, Nabers is in a prime position to be number 1 receiver on the team with a veteran quarterback. Even if it is Caleb Williams, in my opinion, until we see historical trends otherwise, that'll have to happen over the course of like 5 to 10 years in the NFL. I'm always going to err on the side of the veteran quarterback, even if he had just come off of a terrible season and a season-ending injury like we're seeing in New York. The team's building around Daniel Jones. They're sticking with him. And Nabers, I think, is a generational talent. Unlike Rome Odunze, I'm a little bit lower on him. So honestly, I got to say Rome Odunze at 105, probably my least favorite pick that I saw in the first rounds. But cheers to 106. Malik Nabers falls to him. I was in another fantasy football league where I had 106, and I was not expecting to get Malik Nabers there. And I have it on pretty good authority that he's not going to fall there in this particular draft. So for that reason, I traded out. But good for D-Boy getting an absolute steal at 106. Moving on, we saw Xavier Worthy and J.J. McCarthy go next. Xavier Worthy was taken with great draft capital to a semi-sketchy, semi-good situation. Semi-sketchy just because rookie wide receivers tend not to pan out in Andy Reid's offense, at least not right away. We saw it with Rashee Rice. We were expecting probably a 2 or 3 game suspension for him, in my opinion, something small like that. So maybe that gives Xavier Worthy a chance to build a solid role in the offense, although I don't see them at all. They're on different sides of the spectrum. Rashee Rice is more of a short route running wide receiver. Well, Xavier Worthy is obviously the deep threat on the team now. Of course, you got Travis Kelce, an aging Travis Kelce on the team. Probably not going to be a big part of the picture going forward. So Xavier Worthy at 107, I think, is totally appropriate. That's probably what I would have gone for if I was sitting there at 107 or trade back. J.J. McCarthy goes next at 108. I am sort of okay with this too. He is in a pretty interesting situation over there in Minnesota. Seems to be a semi-quarterback friendly situation there with the offense that they're running. Obviously, when you got Justin Jefferson, you are a lot happier as a quarterback there, and you're a lot happier with your pocket passer. Although J.J. McCarthy does have a little bit of wheels, kind of sneaky athletic, but nowhere near like, for example, Daniel Jones is on the football field. I think he's a little bit more of an athlete with his feet than J.J. McCarthy. It is a risk. If you're quarterback needy, 108, maybe not the worst time to take J.J. McCarthy. I personally probably wouldn't, but they do have a lot of draft capital in them, taking him with a premium first-round pick. So up next at 109, we have Brock Bowers. I'm kind of on an island here. I'm not a massive fan of taking Brock Bowers with that premium of a pick. I don't like taking a tight end at all with that premium of a pick. If I'm taking a tight end, I'm waiting till the third or fourth round to get Sinnott, who was drafted in the second round with really solid draft capital. There is an incumbent young tight end there in Las Vegas with Mayer. For all of those reasons, I don't like Bowers. I think it's a massive risk when you can be getting guys that are potentially game changers on your teams like Jonathan Brooks and the guy you'll see I trade up for at the beginning of the second round. So Bo Nix, he has an opportunity to start early. So if that's what you're into, that's fine. They really like him over there in Denver. I, however, don't love the situation that he is in, Bo Nix, in Denver. I'm not sold on that coaching staff, unfortunately, at least at the moment. So there was a guy who was still available who was drafted before him at the same position. I don't mean to spoil it for you, but I really not a massive fan of this pick when there's a lot of other solid first-round talents that were still available and game changers like the guy who was drafted right after, Jonathan Brooks, coming off an ACL. I wouldn't personally be using a premium draft pick on a guy who just come off an ACL, who people perceive he's going to be able to step into the starting role right away. I don't necessarily think that. I don't necessarily think Carolina is going to be able to run the ball again this year like they kind of struggled to last year. And I get that he's supposed to be ready for week one, supposed to be ready for training camp. I don't necessarily think that means he's going to have a great opportunity in year one. So for that reason, I'm probably going to be fading Jonathan Brooks at this price here in the first round when there's guys I am in love with who are still on the board. And a guy who went, honestly, a really great value here. So I actually had ownership to this draft pick, and I actually traded it for Kyren Williams, which I am above the moon for. Brian Thomas, great athlete, decent landing spot in Jacksonville. I am always going to fare with a potential league-winning guy like I believe Kyren Williams is going to be. Obviously, I'm buying the dip a little bit because Blake Corum was drafted with a day 2 pick to the Rams. I'm not obviously as concerned about it. I recognize that it is a risk. However, that is a risk I am more than willing to take because I believe in the talent that is Kyren Williams above and beyond anything. So taking traded Brian Thomas away for Kyren Williams, I'm extremely happy with pairing him with ETN on this team as my 1 and 2 running back. And this roster is really starting to stack up for me. Ladd McConkey is a guy I traded up for. I am a big Ladd guy. Every time I turn on his film, I'm like, hey, this guy looks like an NFL receiver. He blocks too, which is obviously a big part of just getting on the field, getting opportunities as a wide receiver, especially for a hard-nosed offense like the Chargers, which is why I think they drafted him. I think they know he's a great blocker. I think they know he's a great route runner against zone, against man, and he has breakaway speed. He had the measurables to prove it in person in the combine. And every time I clicked on the film, it's just like, man, this guy seems like a Sunday guy and a guy I'm very optimistic for, a guy I expect to earn the starting position there, the wide receiver position there, basically in week 1 over Quentin Johnston and the rest of their crew over there. The only downside to McConkey, which is why he fell this far, in my opinion, is the Chargers aren't going to have a whole lot of passing volume in that offense. But at the same time, I've got a rookie who has the opportunity to gain the starting role right off the bat and potentially score a lot of touchdowns. I think he'll be a great red zone target as well with pretty decent size and just a knack for finding the hole in the zone. So I'm just a massive McConkey guy. So I went ahead and traded up from 206 with a third round draft pick and went ahead and grabbed Vlad McConkey at 201. After him, guy we just talked about, Blake Corum from the LA Rams. He looked really, really good before his injury in college, and then he got injured in college, and then he didn't quite look so explosive, but his stats showed that he still had great vision despite his kind of lack of athleticism following that knee injury. He's still relatively young. He's a little bit long in the tooth in the terms of rookie talents, but young enough to come back from that injury and gain momentum going forward. Pretty telling, though, that a guy who wants to run the football over there, Harbaugh, kind of passed on Corum 2 or 3 opportunities that he had to take him in day 2. So I'm not over the moon with Blake Corum here, but at 202, I'm not going to yell at you, but I will kind of yell at you because Trey Benson was still on the board. Trey Benson, my favorite guy on film in this draft class. He tested pretty damn good with a sub 4.40, good size, kind of like what, in my opinion, one of the more stereotypical running backs in this draft class. I think he was misused in Florida State. I think we're going to find out a lot of those guys were misused in Florida State. And that's why none of them wanted to play in their bowl game against Georgia, which was a great opportunity for them to put good film out there to raise their draft value. James Conner, in my opinion, has kind of been on the decline for a couple of years now. Never really jumped off the film, but has been kind of a opportunity monster in terms of fantasy. And I would expect Trey Benson to start itching away at that on day 1, and from there really, really start to kind of dominate. So Trey Benson, great upside. I would have taken him ahead of Blake Corum there. The next, A.D. Mitchell. I've never been a fan of A.D. Mitchell. 204 is fine. Drafting him there based on his draft capital with a second round draft capital. A.D. Mitchell, a lot of people love him on film. I wasn't extraordinarily impressed with his film. And once I looked into the stats and the context of the film that I was seeing, there's a lot of really concerning statistics on routes per run. He was also ran out of town by Vlad McConkey, who a guy I just took at 201 when he played for Georgia. Xavier Worthy was the guy there. I don't want to take a clear wide receiver 2 with an early draft pick, especially when he's going into a situation like Indianapolis, where he may just never get the opportunity that he really deserves, even if he does deserve it, and I am wrong. So A.D. Mitchell, a guy I would not be targeting, a guy who's entirely off my board. And speaking of guys who are entirely off my board at the moment, Keon Coleman going to Buffalo, great landing spot, but at 205, I'm not super excited about it. Just wasn't a great film guy to me. Granted, he did transfer from my favorite college team, the Michigan State Spartans, so maybe I just have a grudge against him. But he wasn't a guy that really impressed me whenever he had the opportunity to. So for that reason, I don't like Keon Coleman. A guy who I was super bummed out, because I'm sitting here at 211, I believe. A guy I was super bummed out to see fly off the board, Xavier Legette. I'm sitting there thinking like these guys forgot about all of the first round wide receivers in this draft class. I love that situation in Carolina. I am a believer in a somewhat of a Bryce Young bounce back. At least I think he'll be a good value at cost in best ball drafts, maybe not so much in Dynasty right now, but they have the draft capital in them. They're going to build around him. And I think Xavier Legette was a guy I was surprised to be drafted in the first round. In a way, just because the way the community was looking at him. But at the same time, his film looks like a first round draft pick film. So for that reason, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to try and get Legette here. Didn't want to trade up because I still had 3 first round wide receivers still on the board here in the middle of the second round, which is insane. A lot of guys who really shouldn't have fallen fell. I think because ADP, I think some of my league mates kind of forgot to scroll down a couple of scrolls because there was guys kind of buried deep down that were first round draft picks that should have gone way before guys like Keon Coleman, for example. Speaking of guys who, in my opinion, had first round film, Troy Franklin looks like an absolute stud. Caught for almost 1,400 yards in college his last year playing for Oregon. I get maybe the NFL thinks it was all the quarterback doing that. I thought his speed looked good. It showed up pretty well in the combine. Basically had no red flags to me statistically. And film-wise, I thought he was going to be a bona fide first-round pick, and if not a first-rounder, it would be like in that lad range where he gets taken with the second-round pick, or in that area, in that ballpark. And seeing him fall tells me, and seeing the quietness around social media about him leading up to the draft is really just indication to me that there's a massive red flag that a few people know about. Nobody's saying it out loud, but it's usually character concerns or medical concerns. He did end up getting drafted in the 4th round to Denver, which is not a great landing spot with a rookie quarterback over there. So for that reason, Troy Franklin's just not my cup of tea, even though I was super excited about him before the draft. Just how far he fell tells me that I don't know the whole story about Troy Franklin, and for that reason, I'm going to be unfortunately out on him at cost here. I think that's a pretty bad pick. Next pick up, Jalen Wright, a real head scratcher, right? Because they have 2 bona fide running back ones there with Raheem Mostert and Achane. They take just like basically an Achane 2.0 with this pick. Pretty decent draft capital on Jalen Wright, taking him at 208. I don't mind it because obviously the sky's the limit. But not the guy I would be targeting with 2 first-round wide receivers still available and a top 10 overall pick still available. I'm sure you guys have figured out who I got all the way at 211. But pretty mind-blowing that Jalen Wright was taken before Ricky Pearsall. I had my team name all ready to go. I was going to change my team name like Rick and Morty. I was going to change it to Rick and Conkey because I got, ironically, the 2 early drafted white wide receivers in this draft class, and I was just going to change my team name because of it. So I was going to be forced to take him over Polk. Polk, who is also still remaining here. Just for the meme's sake, not necessarily because I think he is head and shoulders ahead of Polk. I really wanted to do the white on white meme. But I didn't get the opportunity to. CB Davis took him out from underneath me. I was really, really bummed about it, but I was doing the math and I'm like, hey, I either got Penix or Polk, who are going to fall to me at 211. So I'm not going to try and trade up. I'm going to stay put here. And Polk was taken at 210, which I was like, great. I'm going to take Michael Penix. I get why he fell here. When he fell to me, I was personally a little bit bittersweet about it myself because I'm like, hey, I'm not going to see this shiny toy for the first couple of years that I have him probably. But going into the draft, I was a big Penix guy. I'm still a big Penix guy. And seeing him go that early, I was like, there's no chance I'm going to get him because he's going to go early first round in Superflex leagues. But I'm in a great position. I've got 3 solid QB1s, will be QB1s next 2 years at least, with Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and Deshaun Watson. But taking Penix here, a guy I can just again, I got a pretty deep stacked roster too. So just roster building wise, here's a guy I can also just put on my taxi squad and not have to use up any roster space unless Kirk Cousins goes down. I give him a couple of weeks and Penix starts balling out. Hey, I'm happy with it. A little bit older guy, but quarterbacks, if they pop, they're going to be popping for 10, 15 years, hopefully starting in the league, which is massively valuable. So getting him all the way at 211, a guy who probably should have gone definitely in the first round to at least some sort of QB needy team, just value wise. I do have Ladd McConkey way ahead of him just because I'm a big Ladd McConkey stan. In my overall rankings, I think I had McConkey like 4th or 5th overall in Superflex. So I'm just a McConkey truther, which is why I took him there. But Penix, honestly, as far as the rest of the community goes, would probably rank him ahead of Ladd and just sit on him for hopefully 1 or 2 years. And it's all pro time for him. Another good thing about him is he had 3 wide receivers that caught for over 1,000 yards. In my opinion, y'all heard I'm not a massive fan of Rome Odunze, and the reason for that is I think a lot of Rome Odunze's highlights are Michael Penix highlights in disguise. He was just putting the ball in areas that I don't think is very normal for a college football player to put him. A little bit inconsistent, but he's going to get to practice under Kirk Cousins for hopefully a year and then take the reins a year or two and take the reins after that. He's going to learn a lot. He's going to develop a lot. Hopefully he's in a good situation in Atlanta. We'll see how the coaching staff is there and how they build around him. A little bit nerve-wracking with potential GM getting fired because the owner didn't like that pick, allegedly. But hey, it's 2-11. I'm swinging for the fences. I'm going to go ahead and take him. Didn't like Michael Corley here, a guy I didn't like out of college. Whenever I see a small college guy play on film, I want him to look like he isn't playing in the wrong conference. I want him to look like an SEC guy who's playing for like a Sun Belt kind of division. And he didn't look like that to me. He just looked like a above average small school kid. I like guys like Cowing way more than I like Corley. So I didn't love that pick out of Brian. And a guy I was happy to see go because I am currently trying to trade back up into this pick right here. Look at this. My offer was accepted. So you guys are going to see me get to pick right here. So I went ahead and traded. I paid kind of a lot. I traded Romeo Dubs for 301 and 401 and like 200 fab. We have 1,000 fab league. So I took 200 fab. So I'm hoping I can kind of trade up for Cowing here in the middle of the third. But I'm just going to go ahead and take the number one guy on the board right here. Day two guy, a Pittsburgh guy. You know he's going to get the opportunity. There is a vacuum of talent there. I think he balled out in the Senior Bowl, which is always awesome for me to see because I think that is one of the most important things. And I've heard like even Bill Belichick talk about that this week is like, hey, we don't really care about the film against shitty teams. We want to see you against the best of the best because that's what we're going to be seeing in the NFL. And when that happened, Roman Wilson really shined. Him and JJ McCarthy, there's not a lot of bad things to say about him other than their overall production, but their production per route run, their production per pass is pretty damn good. We didn't see him make a lot of mistakes because they weren't asked to do a lot. So they made very, very minimal mistakes. And he isn't just such a great situation. Pittsburgh's going to have a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and George Pickens as the bona fide wide receiver one there. And I might be getting the wide receiver two with the potential to become a solid, top 24 wide receiver in the league. And just roster building wise, I'm trying to clear up space. So I do recognize that I might have given up a lot, given up Romeo Dubs, who might be the potential wide receiver one there in Green Bay, or it might be Wicks, or it might be Christian Watson, or Jordan Love might just be passing the ball around the field for all eternity and just spreading it out way too much. And they run the ball way too much for them to ever be home run hits. And I think Roman Wilson could be one of those home run hits that I'm willing to take a massive swing on and just stash in my taxi squad. Again, it's like I'm clearing up roster space with this move because guys like Christian Watson, Romeo Dubs, in my personal roster are guys that are like kind of on the let's kind of get this dead weight off my roster so I can make room for more young guys like Roman Wilson, who I think is like probably the same age as the guy I just traded away for him. But anyways, I'm going to take him right here with 301. Whoo! So far in this draft, I got Kyron Williams basically at 112. I got Ladd McConkey via a trade up. I was runner-up in this league last year, by the way. If Aaron Jones gets taken out of the game a snap earlier in week 17, I win. So that's how close I was to winning. So for that reason, I'm totally willing to trade up and swing for the fences on guys like Ladd McConkey and Roman Wilson, two like guys I think are going to be kind of day one starters in the league here. So yeah, let me know if you want to see the third round to this draft. Some of you degenerates might want to see the fourth round of this draft. And tell me how you think I'm doing, and if you think anybody else in this draft is kicking my butt. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. My name's Jamie Jakes. Thank you. And good night.